As the night fell over the quiet town, the wind howled, casting eerie shadows across the empty roads. The glow of headlights from passing cars was the only thing that pierced the darkness. A woman, Sarah, was returning from a weekend getaway. She had spent the last few days in a quaint little cabin in the mountains, a place she'd chosen for its peacefulness, an escape from the stresses of daily life. Little did she know, this trip would be her last peaceful journey. She had driven down narrow country roads before, but something felt different that night. The darkness seemed thicker, as if it was swallowing her whole. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine and the occasional crackling of the radio. Sarah's eyes darted nervously between the road and the rearview mirror, but there was nothing unusual behind her. Nothing, except for a car far off in the distance. It followed her for miles, its headlights growing nearer and nearer, but she could see no other sign of the car's presence. The tires of her own car squeaked as she made a turn, but the other car did not follow. A chill crept up Sarah's spine as she pressed on the accelerator, eager to get home. But no matter how fast she drove, that other car seemed to follow her closely. She could almost hear its engine revving behind her, though she couldn't spot it in the rearview mirror. Panic began to settle in. She took a few sharp turns, hoping to lose the vehicle, but it was always there, tailing her at a distance, just out of sight but ever present. The winding road stretched endlessly, and it felt like she was trapped in a loop, never able to break free of the eerie pursuit. As Sarah's anxiety heightened, she noticed something far more unsettling. A strange, low hum seemed to resonate from the car's interior. It wasn't the engine, it wasn't the radio, it was something deeper, something that felt unnatural, like the air itself was vibrating. Sarah tried to shake it off, but the sound grew louder and louder, filling her head, making her vision blur. She swerved slightly as her grip on the steering wheel tightened. Her heart pounded in her chest. Was she imagining things? Suddenly, the hum stopped. The silence was deafening. Sarah dared a quick glance in the rear-view mirror. To her horror, the car that had been following her was gone. But the strange sensation in the air didn't dissipate. A cold sweat dripped down her forehead. She forced herself to focus on the road ahead, willing herself not to panic, but the unsettling silence lingered. The road ahead twisted into a dense forest, the trees growing closer and closer, their branches clawing at the sides of the car. She had driven through this area before, but tonight it felt different, darker, more suffocating. Her headlights flickered. Just when she thought the situation couldn't get worse, she saw a figure in the middle of the road. The silhouette was tall, draped in tattered clothing, and unmoving. Sarah slammed her foot on the brakes, skidding to a halt just inches from the figure. Her heart raced as she stared at the shadowy form, unsure whether it was a person or some kind of trick. Her mind was playing on her. The figure didn't move. It didn't react at all. Terror gripped Sarah as she slowly reached for the door handle. She needed to check if the figure was okay. She couldn't just leave it there. But as she opened the door, she felt an icy wind rush past her, pushing her back into the seat. It was as if something was warning her to stay inside. Reluctantly, Sarah closed the door and started the car again, her hands trembling. As she drove past the figure, she took a fleeting glance. But in that split second, the figure's face was revealed, and Sarah froze. It wasn't human. Its face was twisted, the eyes hollow, as if something far more sinister lay behind them. The figure grinned, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth. She had no time to react as the car jolted forward, and the next moment, she was speeding through the winding roads again, the figure no longer in sight. But that wasn't the end of the terror. From that moment on, the road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, as if she was driving into an endless abyss. The trees on either side grew more distorted, their limbs reaching out like grotesque hands. Sarah could feel the weight of the dark, suffocating atmosphere pressing in on her. The hum in the car returned louder now, vibrating her very bones. She couldn't take it anymore. Every part of her screamed to stop, to get out of the car, to run. That was when she saw it. At the edge of the road, where the trees met the horizon, a massive black shape loomed. It was standing still, but it seemed to pulse with a dark energy, a presence too powerful to ignore. She couldn't look away, even though her instincts told her to turn the wheel and flee. It was as if the shape was calling her, drawing her in. Just as she neared the figure, her headlights flickered one last time, and in the split second of darkness, Sarah saw the thing move. No, it didn't just move. It lunged at her, and in the next breath, the world around her exploded into a whirlwind of chaos. The sound of screeching metal and shattering glass filled the air as the car veered off the road, crashing into the trees. Everything went black. When Sarah woke up, it was daylight. She was lying on the side of the road, the car wrecked beyond recognition. But there was no sign of the dark figure, no trace of the nightmare she had just endured. The road was eerily quiet. Was it all just a dream? But as she stumbled to her feet, she saw something that froze her blood. In the dirt beside the wreckage, etched into the ground, was a single word: leave. Her heart skipped a beat. The same word was scribbled in the dust on the dashboard of the car. It hadn't been there before. The terror that had gripped her last. Night had followed her home, and it wasn't about to let go. Something had been watching her, something she would never escape, and that something was still out there, waiting. It was a crisp autumn evening when Daniel found himself heading home after a long day of work. The streets were quiet, the kind of calm that only came after sunset, when most people had settled into their homes, leaving the world empty. But something about tonight felt different. It was as if the shadows had grown deeper, more sinister. Daniel had taken this route home 100 times before, but tonight, as he drove down the lonely country road, he felt an eerie sense of unease creeping over him. The trees on either side of the road loomed like dark sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the low hum of his car's engine. He turned the corner, and there, standing on the side of the road, was a figure, a man, hunched over and looking at the ground, as though lost in thought. Daniel's instinct was to speed past, but something stopped him. The figure's stillness felt wrong, too still, too unnatural. Curiosity overpowered his caution, and he slowed the car, eventually stopping just a few feet from the man. "Hey, are you okay?" Daniel called out, rolling down the window. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he slowly raised his head, revealing his face, or what was left of it. His skin was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes were wide, glassy, and unblinking. A thin, twisted smile spread across his lips, too wide for any human being to possess. Daniel's heart skipped a beat, and before he could say another word, the figure slowly began to step toward him. Something inside Daniel screamed at him to leave, to drive away as fast as possible. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal, and his car lurched forward. But as he sped away, he glanced into the rearview mirror. The figure was following him. At first, it was just a blur, But as he glanced again, he saw the figure running, impossibly fast, its long limbs stretching out, moving in unnatural strides. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. There was no way a person could move that fast. The figure was gaining on him. The road ahead seemed endless, and despite Daniel's desperate acceleration, the figure was closing in. The air in the car felt thick, suffocating. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, and every instinct told him that he was being hunted. Just as he thought he couldn't go any faster, the figure lunged. Daniel's car swerved, tires screeching as he veered off the road. The world around him spun, and in a blur of motion, his car collided with a tree. The impact sent a shockwave through his body, and everything went black. When Daniel came to, the world was eerily still. He was lying on the ground, his head throbbing, his vision blurred. Panic shot through him as he scrambled to his feet. His car was totaled, smoke curling up from the engine. The forest surrounding him was thick and dark, with no signs of civilization anywhere in sight. He stumbled to the edge of the road and saw something that made his blood run cold. The figure from earlier was standing there, staring at him. But it wasn't moving, wasn't advancing like before. It just stood there, watching. Daniel tried to call for help, but his voice was weak, almost as if something was draining the very life from him. The figure's grin stretched even wider, a grotesque mockery of a smile. Its eyes burned with an intensity that sent chills down Daniel's spine. He wanted to run, to escape, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as though he was frozen, paralyzed by the figure's gaze. Suddenly, the air around him seemed to crackle, the temperature dropping sharply. Daniel felt as if he was being drawn into something far worse than just a man. His vision blurred, the world spinning out of control until everything went dark again. When he awoke this time, he was no longer by the wrecked car. He was in an old, decaying house. The walls were crumbling, and the air was heavy with the smell of dampness and rot. It was like he had been transported to another place, another time. His body ached as he tried to sit up, but the pain was unbearable. As he scanned the room, something caught his eye. On the wall, written in what looked like blood, were the words, "You are not alone." Daniel's breath hitched as he turned around, and there, standing at the doorway, was the figure. But it wasn't the same as before. The smile was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Its body was more twisted now, its limbs longer, more skeletal. It was almost as though it had morphed into something far worse, something inhuman. The figure took a step forward, its eyes locked onto Daniel. For the first time, Daniel realized that it wasn't after him. It was waiting for him to understand something. "You can never leave," the figure rasped, its voice a low whisper that echoed in Daniel's mind. Daniel tried to scream, but the sound was muffled, like his voice was being swallowed by the darkness around him. The figure took another step closer, and Daniel could feel the air grow colder with each movement. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing in, the space shrinking. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The figure was gone. The house, too, was gone. Daniel was back on the road, his car still wrecked, the figure nowhere to be found. But the terror never left. The unsettling feeling remained, gnawing at the edges of his mind, like an echo that wouldn't fade away. He couldn't shake the thought that the figure had never truly left him, that it was still out there, watching, waiting for him to cross the line. The car was still totaled, But the road was now empty, and the trees seemed less menacing. He was alone, or so he thought. As he gathered the strength to leave, he caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. The figure was there again, standing in the distance, its twisted grin stretching wider than ever. And this time, Daniel didn't need to see the figure's face to know. It had never left. It was always there, just beyond the edge of reality, waiting for its next victim to fall into its grasp, and Daniel was already too deep. It was a rainy evening when Jake decided to take the shortcut through the woods. He had stayed at his friend's house a bit too late, and now the darkened sky and the steady drum of rain on the roof of his car made him want to hurry home. The woods weren't far off the main road, and although he knew it was a little risky, the shortcut would save him a good 15 minutes. He didn't mind the isolation. In fact, he preferred it. It was quiet, and after a long day, he could just think to himself on the drive. The first few minutes were calm. His headlights cut through the thick fog that hung over the road, barely illuminating the trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. The sound of rain tapping against the windshield was almost soothing, and Jake relaxed into the driver's seat, letting his thoughts drift. But as he drove deeper into the woods, something felt off. It was subtle at first, just a nagging feeling at the back of his mind, a sense of being watched. He shook it off. It was just the darkness playing tricks on him. The woods were dense here, but he'd driven this road 100 times before without incident, so he pressed on. Then, as he rounded a bend, his headlights flickered. The sudden darkness was jarring, and Jake's hand shot up to the dashboard to tap the light switch, trying to get them to turn back on. The headlights flickered once more, before going completely dark. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. He tried the switch again, but nothing happened. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He had heard of people getting stranded in these woods, cars stalling, lights going out, but he hadn't expected it to happen to him. He cursed under his breath, reaching for his phone to call for help. But as his fingers grazed the phone screen went black as well. No signal, nothing. He cursed again, slamming his hands against the wheel in frustration. His mind raced, and his eyes darted around the darkness outside the car, trying to make out any shapes through the mist. He tried the engine, but it sputtered and died. The eerie quiet settled in like a weight, and Jake's heart started to race. He tried to stay calm, telling himself it was just a power failure, an unlucky coincidence. But the more he sat there, the more it felt like something wasn't right. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the road, just beyond the reach of his headlights. It was hard to make out at first, just a shadow in the dark, but as he stared, it became clearer. It was a woman. Her long, wet hair hung in front of her face, and she stood motionless, staring into the distance. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Who would be out here in the middle of the night, in the pouring rain? "Hey, are you okay?" Jake called out the window, his voice shaking slightly. The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, her back turned to him, her body stiff and unnatural. Jake felt a strange sense of dread rise up in him. He shouldn't approach. He knew that deep down. But something compelled him to roll down the window, his hand moving against his will. As the window descended, a cold gust of wind swept through the car, sending a chill through his bones. Suddenly, the woman turned her head. Jake's breath hitched in his throat. Her face was pale, almost sickly, with dark circles under her eyes. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her skin was pulled tight against her skull, as though she hadn't eaten in weeks. But what truly unsettled Jake was her eyes. They were wide and glazed over, the irises clouded with a milky white film. There was something horribly wrong with them, something unnatural. "Are you lost?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step forward, and then another, and another. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet being controlled by unseen strings. Jake's instincts screamed at him to drive away, but his body froze. He couldn't look away from her, from those lifeless eyes. The woman stopped just beside the car, inches from the open window. She leaned forward, her face pressing against the glass, her breath fogging it up. Jake could see her mouth move, but no sound came out. Her lips formed words, something he couldn't hear, but something that sent a shiver crawling down his spine. Suddenly she raised her hand. It was thin, like bone, the skin stretched tight over her fingers, and before Jake could react, she placed it on the window, her nails scraping the glass. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. A low screech that made his teeth ache. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the woman stepped back into the shadows, vanishing into the mist. Jake's heart was pounding in his chest. His thoughts were a blur. He looked around desperately, but there was no sign of her. No sign of anything. The road was empty, the night quiet again. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. His mind screamed at him to get out of there, to drive away as fast as he could, but he was paralyzed, unsure of what he had just seen. In a frantic rush, he slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The engine roared to life, and the headlights flickered on, cutting through the dark once more. Jake sped down the road, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. As he raced through the woods, the rain began to ease, but the tension in the air never left. After a few minutes, Jake spotted the first sign of civilization, a lone streetlight in the distance. He felt a momentary sense of relief, but when he approached it, his blood turned to ice. There, at the base of the streetlight, stood the woman, her face turned toward him, her wide, milky eyes locking onto his. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, waiting. The light flickered once, then went out. The road ahead plunged into complete darkness. Jake's car sped down the road, but when he looked back, the streetlight flickered back on for a split second, revealing the woman standing there once again, waiting for him to come back. Jake never took that shortcut through the woods again, but every time he closed his eyes, he could still see her face, pale, twisted, and waiting. And he knew, deep down, that one day he might find himself on that road again. It was the kind of night where the air felt thick with mystery. The kind of evening when the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the empty streets. Kelly had never been a fan of driving at night, especially not through rural roads like this one, but she was running late and had no choice. She needed to get to her cousin's house, and the quickest way was through the forested route that cut across the small town. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly, their dark silhouettes pressed against the sky, and the only sound was the hum of her car's engine and the occasional rustling of the wind. Kelly wasn't superstitious, but tonight, as she drove deeper into the woods, she felt an unsettling chill creep up her spine. It felt like the world around her was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As she turned a sharp bend in the road, her headlights flickered, causing her heart to skip a beat. The lights came back on after a few seconds, but when they did, they illuminated something in the road that made her pulse race. A figure. It was a man, standing motionless in the middle of the road, staring down at the ground. He didn't seem to notice the car approaching, his posture rigid and unnatural. Kelly slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as she came to a sudden stop just a few feet from him. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the figure. His clothes were dark, tattered in places, and his hair was long and matted with dirt. He looked as though he'd been out in the woods for days, or maybe even weeks. He had a strange, blank expression on his face, and something about the way he stood there, so still, so unblinking, made Kelly's stomach turn. "Hey, are you okay?" Kelly called out the window, her voice trembling slightly. The man didn't respond. He didn't even move. He just stood there, swaying slightly in the breeze. Kelly felt a wave of unease wash over her, and something told her to drive away, to ignore the stranger and keep going. But the road ahead was narrow, and she couldn't pass without moving closer. She took a deep breath and slowly opened the car door, stepping out cautiously. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, her voice louder this time, trying to be as calm as possible. The man raised his head, slowly, too slowly. Kelly's blood ran cold as his eyes locked onto hers. They were wide, unfocused, and hollow. There was no recognition in them, no life, just an endless, empty void that seemed to stare right through her. And then, with a sickening slowness, he smiled. The smile was wide, far too wide, stretching across his face until it almost reached his ears. Kelly took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. The man's smile grew larger, more twisted, and before she could react, he started to walk toward her. His steps were slow, deliberate, and as he moved, the air grew colder, the night becoming more oppressive. "Please," Kelly said, panic creeping into her voice. "What do you want? I can help you." But the man didn't speak. He just kept walking, his eyes fixed on her, his smile never fading. Every instinct in Kelly's body screamed at her to run, to get back into her car and drive away, but her legs felt frozen to the ground, her body unwilling to move. The man was closer now, so close that she could hear his raspy breathing, like a sound made by someone who hadn't spoken in years. She could feel his cold presence, a chill creeping into her bones. And she knew, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that this wasn't a man at all. Not anymore. Suddenly, the man stopped just a few feet in front of her, his smile stretching, impossibly wide. His mouth opened, revealing teeth that were sharp, jagged, and blackened. Kelly's pulse thundered in her ears as she backed away slowly, her heart racing. And then, without warning, the man's smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of pure fury. His eyes burned with an intensity that made Kelly's blood run cold. He lunged toward her, and just as she turned to run, she felt a sharp tug on her arm. She cried out, but the man's grip was like iron, pulling her back toward him. With a desperate scream, Kelly managed to break free, stumbling backwards, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She ran to the car, throwing herself inside, slamming the door shut with shaking hands. Her eyes locked on the rearview mirror, but there was no sign of the man. Just the empty road, stretching out into the dark. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Maybe she had just gotten too scared. But then, as she glanced to the side of the road, she saw him again. The man. His twisted smile was back, but this time, he wasn't standing still. He was running alongside her car, his long, ragged strides keeping pace with her, his hollow eyes glowing in the headlights. Kelly's hands gripped the wheel as she floored the gas pedal. The car shot forward, tires screeching, and the man vanished into the mist. But the memory of his unblinking stare, his monstrous grin, stayed with her. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she sped down the road, her mind reeling from the terror she had just experienced. When she finally reached her cousin's house, Kelly didn't wait for a second. She parked quickly, bolted out of the car, and ran to the door. Her cousin answered the knock, but Kelly didn't say a word. She just collapsed into his arms, her body trembling uncontrollably. Later that night, as Kelly lay in bed, trying to calm her racing heart, she heard something that made her blood freeze. A tap. Soft at first, then louder. A knock on the window. Kelly didn't dare look. She didn't need to. She already knew who was standing outside waiting for her. And she also knew, deep down, that she would never be able to escape.